Caution, this episode contains mature topics and may not be suitable for all listeners.
Yeah, we did not know God or Jesus in our home whatsoever because I had learned to become what anybody wanted me to be. That's how I survived my childhood. I simply read you from across the table and then just became what you needed. And when he drank, his childhood demon came back, which was molesting small children. And my addiction was going to be, I was going to keep myself safe and I would control every aspect of my life to try to keep myself safe. How could this keep continuing to happen to me? It must be me. I must be broken in some way that can't be repaired. I will never forget the feeling that night. I was safe with my children. He could not find me. Converting, however, doesn't change any of your old behaviors. Nothing changes if nothing changes.
Have you ever heard that old nursery rhyme, Rockabye Baby? Have you ever wondered why the cradle wasn't good enough where it was? I mean, why put the cradle in the treetops? Did the mother feel the treetops would be safer? Was there a past event where something tried to harm one of her babies and she just wanted to prevent another bad incident? If you've read this rhyme, then you know it doesn't end well for the baby. The wind blows, the branch breaks, and down falls the baby, cradle and all. Have you ever tried to control things or events in your life? Sometimes, like sand in my hand, the harder I squeeze, the more I lose. Is it possible that the reason I want total control is because of something negative in my past? Is it possible that what my life really needs is less control and more surrender? But to what should I surrender? Or should I say, to who should I surrender? Could surrendering my life to God's will and control actually bring healing to my past and peace to my present? These are questions that I want to ponder today as our guest shares her life change story with us. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. Our guest is zooming in all the way from California. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, my name is Carolyn Brady, and I live in Vacaville. The closest location that you would know about is our capital city of Sacramento. And I'm very blessed to live with my husband of 26 years, Mr. Brady. We have 7 wonderful children. We have 4 boys and 3 girls. And from that, we've been blessed with 5 grandboys. So we have an amazing family.
Well, that is amazing. So let me ask you, where did you begin? Have you always been from California? Tell me a little bit about where you were born and raised.
So I was born in Concord, which is about an hour from here. And I have brilliant parents. My father and mom both graduated from the University of Chicago. And my dad's life work was he was an engineer and he helped build large buildings that he hoped one day would fuse the atom. So he was pretty brilliant. And he met my mom in the university. And when they met and they married, my mother left the university and they bought their home in Concord. And really, for the most of my life, that was the home I lived in.
So now you have a large family right now. Did you grow up in a large family? Did you have any siblings? Tell me a little bit about that.
I did not grow up in a large family. It was just my brother and myself. And my brother is 4 years older than I. And we grew up in a very unconventional home. So my mom and dad divorced when I was 4 and my brother was 8. And it was a tough thing. My dad was a brilliant man, traveled worldwide. And I would say he was meeting people as he was traveling. I'm going to put it that way. Well, then he met a woman that he wanted to spend his life with. And he divorced my mom. And when he divorced mom, her heart broke. I mean, broke. And she began drinking pretty significantly.
Wow.
Um, and my mom decided from that point on, no male was going to tell her what to do again in her lifetime. And so she was a real woman's liber in the 60s and 70s. And she was kind of a hippie. So we lived a very unconventional lifestyle in our home. Um, as she drank, my mom, when she drank to a certain point, she got pretty mean, pretty belligerent. And Rob became my protector, and he did it very well. He
Oh,
really did. That's
oh,
probably what grew us the closest, is we were trying to survive mom.
wow. Well, you said a lot in that last
Yeah.
answer. So, do you remember? I mean, you were 4. That's pretty young. Do you
Hmm.
remember the divorce? And do you remember that? Was it traumatic for the whole family, or not so much?
It, mom, I remember the day my dad drove away. And when he found Wanda, my stepmom, she was just a slimmer version of my mother, to be honest. And she had an older daughter and a son. So the day we watched dad drive away, it appeared that he had a new family that was like us, but he was leaving us. And I think my dad knew that there was some things going on with my mom. And we didn't know as children then what was happening. Um, but as he drove away, I will never forget the look on my brother's face. I will never forget it. Heartbroken to the very core. His dad was leaving.
So, did
Yeah,
you feel
tough.
abandoned as well? I mean, it sounds like he certainly felt abandoned. Did you feel that way, or do you even
I don't
remember?
think so. I don't think I really put all that together until we were living in the thick of mom's alcoholism. And my dad was not saying, come live with me. That wasn't part of our conversations. And I think as a child, you think it's just because he doesn't know. But I think there was more behind that. And I think later I felt as though my dad didn't care enough to rescue me from what I was living in.
So, did it make you feel a little unloved or unwanted by your dad, or not?
That's a good question. When we visited dad, um, I always stayed with his mother at grandma's house, but my brother went over to his house. And I remember thinking, what was it about me that I didn't get to go to the house? Right. So I stayed with grandma, and that sent in me probably one of the first pieces of that codependency, which was, what is it about me that that I need to change so that I can come over to your house and be loved in the family, right? I was already struggling with, I couldn't fix my mom and her drinking, right? And then I'd go to see my dad, and Rob would go to dad's house, but I would stay with grandma. And so as a child, I think we just own that and go, it must be me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Let me
Mm-hmm.
ask you this question. So, do you think that your mom did she drink? Do you think she drank before your dad left? Do you feel like that there was that maybe you didn't see it, that there was an alcohol problem before then? Or do you think that it was the divorce that caused the alcohol problem with your mom?
I really think it was the divorce. I think my dad was super big on image. And because he was a world traveler, he traveled in some pretty scientific circles, let's put it that way. Um, and mom had 2 kids. And look back now, and my mom was a size 14, which was perfectly appropriate. Wanda was probably a size 6, just to be honest. And I think some of my mom felt like, I've given you 2 kids and I'm raising these 2 children, and 14 is an okay size. And all that is really true. It's absolutely 100% true.
Yeah.
So I just feel like he broke her heart. And when I read their love letters, And there were some in college that I've been able to read. There was a huge love between them. But then I think dad got into the world, to
Yeah.
be honest.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let me ask you this question. You haven't mentioned God yet. So, was God a part of your childhood growing up? Did you have, was it, I mean, you may not remember with your mom and dad before the divorce, but after the divorce. So, did you go to church? Did your grandmother tell you about Jesus? I mean, tell me a little bit about your spiritual relationship whenever you were young.
Yeah, we did not know God or Jesus in our home whatsoever. So as growing up, there was always a Bible, the family Bible on the bookshelf, but it stayed there and it never came down. I would say my mother would say organized religion is absolutely not for me. So we really had no religious upbringing or background. So I really heard people talk about Jesus and I had no idea who they were talking about.
So, how were you
Mm-mm.
in school? Were you an outgoing type A personality and just happy go lucky, or were you very withdrawn? Tell me a little bit about what you thought about yourself and what you projected to other people.
Yeah, so I was the girl that everybody considered their confidant. And because I had learned to become what anybody wanted me to be, that's how I survived my childhood. I simply read you from across the table and then just became what you needed. And so I appeared to be very, very confident in school. But then I went home to this really fearful, unsafe place every night. And I heard other people going to church. I heard other people having church activities. And at that point, I truly believed no one would ever let me go into those places based on my mother's alcoholism and then the other big secret I carried, which was my friend and I were molested by her dad.
Oh,
And Candy was my best friend growing up, and she was the one who knew about my mom's drinking, and she knew how she got after she drank. Candy's father also drank, and when he drank, his childhood demon came back, which was molesting small children. And everybody was fairly intoxicated, so we were pretty easy targets. Um, Candy and I lived at each other's houses, but when we lived at her house and spent the night, it was a different kind of night for us.
so did you stop wanting to spend the night with Candy? I mean, did you kind of know what was going to happen when you went over there?
I didn't know what safety was. I had no idea. Mom's belligerent and hurtful behavior was kind of my normal. Candy's family, she had lots of brothers and sisters. And so it felt like a family, but then there was this horrible thing that was happening to Candy and I at night. And, as a child, you will seek what you need. And we were best friends and we were each other's kind of safety zone. And so we weren't going to lose that. We just weren't going to lose that. And I knew that those were my mother's only friends. And I didn't want to risk my mother not having a friend either.
So I want to ask you some questions about that, and if you don't feel
Hmm.
comfortable answering, that's okay. But I'm curious of the first time that you went over to Candy's house and this happened. I mean, it had to be a scary, it had to be a traumatic event that happened. Did you talk to Candy about it? Did you talk to your mom or anybody about it, or did you just keep it a secret and just continue to let it happen?
So when our families got together, there was a lot of alcohol. And so most people were highly intoxicated. So the little girls would always go camp out like into the big living room, right? And then after everyone went to bed, we'd hear him walk down the hallway and he'd find us. And he molested us side by side. Candy and I always pretended that we were asleep, and we never said anything the next morning.
Wow. So
And
you
then we'd
didn't
go out and he'd be having his coffee and he'd look at us and he'd say, "How'd you sleep, little girls?"
you didn't
And
talk to Candy about it at all? Like, can like,
truly, we pretended like it just didn't happen.
wow. That is
I
so
think I think that's how, as a child, I think when I look back, I'll be very honest, I have lost quite a bit of my memory as a child. But when I try to put some time frames around it, I really think it started around 6 or 7 and went on till I was about 10, I would say. And we just protected ourselves by saying we pretended we were asleep.
that's so hard.
It
I'm
is.
yeah, devastating stuff. So
Yeah,
you
it
kept
changed us forever. It
yeah,
forever changed us.
yeah.
That trauma changes you forever.
So was your mom physically abusive to you or just verbally abusive?
She was verbally abusive. And I remember she would be so intoxicated that she would be demeaning or belittling my brother and I, but we were both in our rooms. She was just talking to somebody that wasn't there. And then she'd walk down the hallway and she'd be swearing. Well, I would be sitting next to my door to keep the door shut. So they're just those instances became my normal. And at about 10, the pain of what was happening to Candy and I got to be pretty overwhelming. And I remember saying, "I'm going to tell my mom." And I remember telling her, and I remember watching her heart break again as I told her. She promised me that you'd never have to spend the night at Candy's again, and and that it wouldn't happen again. I did not have to spend the night at Candy's again, but she continued drinking with them and socializing with them. Both Candy and I never got counseling. It was just never spoken of again. And I think later in years, my mother, I believe, had told Candy's mom, and she was in some significant denial too. And I did hear the phrase, "Well, little girls have very active imaginations." And, at that point, I think that's where my addiction started. I'll be very honest. And my addiction was going to be, I was going to keep myself safe and I would control every aspect of my life to try to keep myself safe.
Wow. Well, I want to dig into that some more, but let's move into what you thought about yourself. So preteen, before high school, did these events, did all the stuff, did that skew your outlook of yourself? Did you feel insecure or did you feel unworthy? Did any of that stuff come out? I mean, tell me what you thought about Carolyn.
I thought Carolyn was on this earth to help other people. And so how I felt validated is when I was caring for someone, when I was loving them or helping them or those things. Um, I didn't have any idea how to even take care of Carolyn. I didn't really even know who she was. She was somebody who kind of survived. And there were things that I remember as a child. Like I remember swinging on a swing or being in the pool. And that's when I felt free. Those moments are when I felt free. As I got into those high school years, those became faraway memories for me. I don't think I felt free. I felt unsafe at home. Um, but I didn't know that there was a way that that was ever going to change for me. I kind of thought this was my lot in life. Um, I was harmed by two other men during my high school years. And those were boys on the block that I had no idea the red signs. I had no idea that when, back in my day, I'm dating myself here, you could go out and play until the streetlights went on, right? You could do that. And it never occurred to me that when these older boys were saying, Carolyn, come with me, I'll show you the best hiding place, that that wasn't safe for me. For me, that was like, you're going to protect me. You're going to keep me safe. And I'd go there and be harmed. And so I think that's where the message was, how could this keep continuing to happen to me? It must be me. I must be broken in some way that can't be repaired. I think that was where my heart was during those years in high school.
So tell
Yes.
me, did you feel like, after those events, I mean, you feel like, man, I need to report these guys? I mean, did you have any of that at all? Or did you just say, no, I don't want anybody to know and I'm going to keep it secret? I mean, what was your thought after those traumatic events?
I think those traumatic events were when the dialogue really did change, which was, you deserve this. And it fueled my control. So I became the aggressive one. I became the one that was going to stay in control in any of those situations. And I began putting myself in unsafe places with unsafe people, with really not knowing how unsafe it truly was. So, but then I became the aggressive one. So I was going to call the shots. I was going to do those things to keep myself safe.
So did you take part in any of the substance abuse or the alcohol? So I mean, apparently there was quite a bit of alcohol around your home and
Yes.
quite a bit with Candy's family as well. And so it sounds like
Hmm.
this was a fairly common thing. So did at some point you say, "Hey, I think I'm going to try it"? And did you participate in any of that or not?
I didn't. I decided pretty early on that that was not going to ever be me. And substances have never been my issue. My issues have come around learning how to take care of Carolyn. How do we take care of Carolyn and not pour my life into others? And part of that is that I didn't know Jesus yet. Truly, I, when I met Jesus, that's when he started healing that. And
Well,
until then, it was a survival game.
yeah.
It was survival.
So help me understand your control. So the control was not, you said to keep yourself safe, but it sounds to me like then instead of being the victim, saying, okay,
Correct.
I'm being taken advantage of. Now I'm going to put myself in these situations where now I know this is going to happen, and there's some security in the fact that I know something's going to happen. So it sounds to me like you put yourself in sexual situations where you were the instigator. Am I understanding you correctly? Tell me a little bit more
So
about the control.
what I did learn during that period, and terrible lesson to learn for a young woman, was there's a lot of control in sexuality. And you can be validated in a whole nother way. And I was learning how to use that part of my life to get the control that I wanted.
Okay.
And you are 100% accurate. I became sexually aggressive. And then I knew exactly how far I could go and when I could stop it and when I could walk away. And that person was probably going to call me again. Yeah. Yeah.
So as you went through high school, did you graduate high school? Did you get through high
Oh, you
school?
did. You
Yeah.
bet. I graduated high school with honors because that was the image, right?
Yeah.
I had to look like I was absolutely on target and on control, right? Um, so graduated and at that point did have a boyfriend, and there was some security in that. He had a very, very nice family. And right after I graduated, I did travel Europe for a couple months with a friend.
So
We did.
you're with a friend, you're in Europe, but you
Hmm.
still have a boyfriend back in the States. Is that accurate?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
So
Hmm.
did you
Hmm.
stay? loyal to your boyfriend while you were in Europe, or did you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. There was a lot of freedom when I went to Europe, and I just used the tools that I'd been using when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And it certainly got me a whole lot of attention, and it certainly gave that validation that I was seeking. It fueled it like nobody's business.
So, did you have any guilt or shame involved in that? I mean, or did you block that completely out? I mean, tell me, what were you feeling? So, you're in Europe, you've got a boyfriend back in the States. Did you say, gosh, I really shouldn't be doing this? And, you maybe talked to him on the phone or whatever, or when you got back, did you feel any guilt or shame with that? Or this was just, and like you said, controlling and being exactly what you wanted?
I think the part of my behavior when I was in Europe was the fear that he was going to walk away like my dad. And so I better have a plan B. I better have a plan B. That's that control. That's that root control that even as a teen, you may not understand why you're doing it, but looking back and having the years of recovery, man, I've unpacked that bad boy. And I was conflicted. Um, as much as I didn't know Jesus, Jesus knew I would eventually be his. And I believe in some ways he kept my heart soft in some ways to go, Carolyn, that's not the way you should be acting. So conflicted, but the fear always made the choice.
So did you ever, you look back and say, okay, God tried to get my attention here, or did you have any interaction with church or any of that stuff? Or was God still a deity up in, the formal church? Tell me a little bit about where you were in that time frame in your life.
So not really seeking in any way, shape, or form, but God was definitely seeking me. So my last week in Europe, I ended up losing my passport. And I turned myself into the embassy and went into the embassy, and they found a covenant that would hold me for a week while they reissued my passport. So I went into this covenant, and doggone it, the only book to read was the Bible.
Well,
It
boy,
was
that's a
it.
divine appointment, isn't it?
It
Wow.
was King James. So it was a little hard, but I was bored stiff, right? I mean, they definitely fed me, but I was in a room for a week. I got to be honest. And so I began kind of reading it and thinking, hmm, I I think this is the book that was on the bookshelf all those years, right? And so I just kind of began reading it. And the friend I went to Europe with was a Mormon in through and through. And so when she and I finally got back to the airport together, I told her my story, and she said, "You were reading the Bible?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I got to tell you, I really wasn't lonely during that week. I was kind of getting into it." She said, "What you should be reading is this book." And it was the Book of Mormon.
Mm.
Well, right before I went to Europe, these missionaries showed up at my door. And I always knew in Holly's house, there was never any alcohol. And I also knew in Holly's house that they were a family in a way that I'd only observed and I'd never experienced. So when the Mormon missionaries came to my door and I'd had this experience in the Bible, I thought, this has to be God. He's helping me find a place where I can be safe. Nobody drinks. They believe in families. I'm going to be safe there. And they talk about Jesus. And because I'd had no formal religious or Jesus education, I don't want to call it religious. I just don't think that's a good word. Because I didn't know Jesus personally, that was the closest Jesus that I could know at that point.
Did you
Mhm.
convert at that point or not?
I converted over the next 60 days. I did. Um, Converting, however, doesn't change any of your old behaviors. Nothing changes if nothing changes.
I've heard that somewhere.
And yeah, me too. It's a good one. Um, Nothing changes if nothing changes. So, and I didn't know the real Jesus. I just didn't. I knew a Jesus in context of a religious organization, which you can only understand how that fueled my mother. She did not believe in, and especially in a patriarchal religion. That was like double dip and no, right? So I did convert, and pretty quickly I met a young man, used all the old tools, and we were married within 6 months.
So is this after your trip to Europe or
Yes, yes. I came home. I was home. I'd lived away from my mother, away from the drinking, and I just knew I couldn't go on in this house like this anymore. And started attending the Mormon church on Sundays, and went through all their the missionary lessons, those kinds of things. Definitely was baptized as a Mormon, and was attending churches on Sunday, and met a young man at the church. So it seemed like God was aligning the universe for me. Mhm.
so what does the and again I went to seminary. I know the Bible pretty well. How do the Mormons, I mean, whenever you converted over, and I know that you didn't have the background of the Bible or
Mm-mm.
any of that stuff. So, but what did they tell you about Jesus? I mean, was Jesus just a prophet? I mean, do they believe he's the son of God? Do they believe, because Jesus said, I am God, and I don't,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, what was, tell me a little bit about the theology just quickly for the listeners that don't know anything about Mormonism, because it's different than Christianity.
It truly is. And I don't like to use this word very often, but I'm going to just put it out there. Heretical. It's heretical. And so what that big word is that it does not follow the teachings of our God-breathed and inspired and only true belief, which is the Bible. So Mormonism was the brainchild of Joseph Smith, and he is the prophet. They believe he is a prophet of God, and that anything he says becomes scripture. And he had some thoughts that absolutely do not line up with God's word. So, as you're going through the Mormon teachings, you're hearing a lot about Joseph Smith's journey to Mormonism. You're not hearing as much about Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit, let alone the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So you have this belief in Joseph Smith and the church. So when I would give testimony at a Mormon church, I would get up and state something to the effect of, I know the church is true and that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. That's what you believed in. It comes with a lot of things. It's a full patriarchal society. Mormons are 100% work based. So we earn our way into three heavens, the telestial, celestial, and terrestrial. And based on whether you go through the temple rites and those kinds of things, kind of helps you where you're going to land in the afterlife. And I know that's a big cup of water and there's a lot involved there. But Mormonism is a lifestyle. That's what I want to tell you. You are busy Monday through Sunday doing the Mormon way.
Okay.
I will say to you, that worked 100% for me because the more I worked, the more I was validated. So that kind of was a turning point in my life. I thought, this is why I've worked my whole life because now I have this pathway. And to be honest, I was a doggone good Mormon for 18 years. And yeah, so it really did work for me. The part that probably was the hardest is we had two incredibly hurt people. My first husband had his own background. He also was harmed by his father. And You can't take two hurt birds and make them a whole. And we brought all of our baggage into that marriage. And he he had rage.
Mm.
And that was probably the worst possible fit for this girl.
I was going to say, you're
So,
kind of used to the rage with your mom. I mean, you're used to, I mean, again, you didn't say physical, but with your mom, there was anger and rage in her
right.
words and verbal. So it may have felt a little bit deja vu as you went into this, and all of a sudden he started having the rage, but it doesn't sound like it was alcohol induced, though, was it?
It was not. It was, I truly believe there was a lot of mental health issues going on. If I
Yeah.
were to look back now, um, we definitely did the Mormon way. We began having children, and about every 2 years, I was pregnant. And so, what really changed in my life was rage with children. And that's where I think it became so much harder. The rage was it wasn't just against me anymore. It was against my children. And just insidious, insidious. And in the Mormon faith at that time, it has changed some. But in that time, we didn't talk about what was happening in our homes, good or bad. Well, we talked about the good, but if there was something going on that wasn't in line with Mormonism, we just didn't talk about it. And it never got talked about. People knew that we were being harmed, but no one was stepping into our lives. So it just meant I had to work harder. That's kind of the message I got from that was you just got to work harder, Carolyn. And I am humbly saying this. Part of me believed another child will fix this. Another child will fix this. Yeah. Mhm.
So tell me a little bit, how long were you married before you started thinking this guy is, and it sounds to me like he may have been a little physical abusive as well with his anger. I don't
He
know.
was. He was. We were married for a total of 18 years. And I had a life-changing event. When I became pregnant with my sixth child, um, I went to the doctor and she delivered a couple of mine. And she just kind of looked at me and she patted my arm and she said, "How are you doing?" I said, I am so tired and that is not like me at all. And she just kind of said, "Okay." And to put this in perspective, a year before I'd lost my mother to cancer. Um, she died of cancer, but what she really died of was her alcoholism. Yeah. And so I'm married and I'd just gotten done taking care of my mother and her cancer. And about 2 weeks later, my doctor called me and said, "We found a lesion, Carolyn." And I said, "Tell me about that." And she said, "It's cancer." And I went, "Oh." She says, "So we need to get you in here pretty quickly and we need to start making some choices." At that point, it was just a lesion. And the deal was we didn't want it to get outside of my uterus. And so at month 7, my doctors biopsied me the last time and said, "Hey, come back to us after she's born." And so Jillian Elizabeth was born healthy, which is awesome. I went back and we did another biopsy and it had gone invasive. Now it was in my lymph nodes. And that meant I was going to have a radical hysterectomy and it meant that I was going to go through radiation treatment. That was my wake up call. Um,
So
oh yeah,
what was the call? Did you think, "Oh my gosh, I could die from this," or what?
it was realizing that I may not survive my surgery. And they made that fairly clear. Um, that in all honesty, how could have God allowed me to have that baby and now I have more cancer? Um, is your plan really that I'm going to be taken from this earth and these kids are going to be left with an abuser? Are you really? But what I really want you to hear is that God was saving me to save me. Save me to save me. I was living in immense denial. I was not addressing what was happening to the kids and I in that house. And I had allowed my fear to have them now living in abuse, poverty, and neglect. And that was this moment of, I have repeated, my children are living my childhood, and now I may not survive. Oof. I can tell you that's like an elephant on your chest. And I remember beginning to say, God, I will do anything it takes to help us learn to be safe. Please help me survive. Please help me survive. And he did. I am worshiping a foreign God, and he still loved me. He still knew she's mine. Okay, she's gone around the path of possible last experience I wanted her to, but she's still mine. And he held me, and we got through that surgery. And when I came home, he had opened my eyes. I saw it all in living color, is what I'd like to tell you. And I saw the abuse in my home like I'd never seen it before. And I went to counseling and admitted what had happened to me in my childhood. And I had an amazing counselor who heard me. And I told her, I've repeated the cycle, but I got to find a way to support 6 kids. It seemed very big at the time. It did. Um, but God had a plan. God still had a plan for me. I began seeing everything that my husband, how his behavior was affecting us. I began seeing my children experience it in a way I had become numb to before. Um, and simultaneously, I was beginning to doubt that Mormonism was true. The way I'd lived my life, my whole life, was I yet living another lie?
So what made you start questioning that?
That there were people who actively knew what was happening to me under a patriarchal system, and no one was coming in to address my husband. And I was beginning to go, I don't believe you should have other wives. I don't think that that's okay. I don't believe that a person who is mistreating his family should be in leadership of his family. I don't believe those things. And it became harder and harder for me to attend church on Sundays at the Mormon church. Something else was happening that I'd like to say is another life change piece for me. I started going to a community college, and I began taking my classes. I was able to bring my children there for childcare, but then I had to go home every night back to the abuse, right? I also had taken a Spanish class, and that's where I met my second husband, Mr. Brady. So he was a police officer. He worked in Concord for his whole career. And Rob knew Jesus. Rob knew Jesus. And then the next life change night, I watched my husband harm my oldest daughter for the last time. And I remember taking a deep breath, and I remember shaking through the whole thing, but I called the police. Units pulled up, and we lived around most of the people who attended the ward we were in. The Relief Society president saw the cars at my home. He called the bishop. The bishop ended up coming over and he wanted to just settle the situation. So the officers are on the porch. He said, let me just go talk to John. And I said, okay. And he went in, and the police officers are saying, I need to let you know what's going to happen here is we can probably remove him for a night, but the best scenario is for you to be removed. And the next best scenario is that whoever gets to the courthouse first will gain temporary custody of these children. So tomorrow morning, if you're removed, you get to that courthouse and you get a restraining order. And I was hearing them and I was listening. And then my bishop came back out and he is like so rattled and so shooken. And he just looked at me and he goes, I need you to get your children to the van outside. We're taking you out of here. Got to tell you, he was the first bishop in Contra Costa County to remove a woman from her home. So the Relief Society president pulled up her van. He says, I need you to do it quietly. I don't care if you have to give them chocolate to get in that van. You get in that van tonight. So we got my kids out. They took me to a hotel and I didn't have a dime, didn't have any food, but all my kids were with me. And I will never forget the feeling that night. I was safe with my children. He could not find me. He didn't know where I was. And that was another big page turner for me. I went, I will be at the courthouse tomorrow and I'll do whatever it takes. So that night I realized I had to get to the courthouse. And by the grace of God, I knew one police officer and I called Rob. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm just, kind of in a hotel. I'm trying to totally cream it over, right? I'm like, okay, I'm in a hotel. Yeah, it's kind of removed from my home and blah, 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 blah. And he is just like, what? Um, but I said, but he goes, what do you need? What do you need? And I said, tell me how I get a restraining order. And he's like, okay, let's walk through it. And I went down to the courthouse and with 6 children, filled out all my paperwork. Then it was really a process. Then the backlash of the church came.
Did you file for divorce during that same time?
So when I went in to fill out that paperwork, the guy said, if you're going to do it, this is probably a pretty good time. And he said, because we can summon him on both terms, so he can't escape it, basically, right? So I did. I filed, and he really pushed back. It took a long time for me to be free. The divorce proceedings could have gone quickly within 3 months. We were there for a year and a half trying. Yeah. From the time I called Mr. Brady, he did not leave our sides. He ensured that he wasn't coming back at night to terrorize us. He got in once. My ex-husband got in once, and that was pretty tough. But yeah, he just parked his car there, and that meant that my ex-husband wasn't going to try to get on property.
Sounds like he broke the restraining order if he got into your house. Wasn't that against the restraining order?
It was. So it was the middle of the night, and I felt hot breath on the back of my neck. And I was told, keep your eyes shut. Do not open them until you see the sun come through that window. And he threatened me. And I think he thought, I'm going to do this and then she will let me back in.
Okay.
Because I will have the upper hand again. And I will scare her to get me back in, right?
Fear tactic.
And
yeah.
Yes. And
So,
he walked out. I was frozen. I mean, frozen. I couldn't move. So I did keep my eyes closed till morning.
Yeah.
I did. So it was a hard couple years. And God still had us. God still was trying to save me. He'd brought Mr. Brady into my life who knew Jesus. And um, as Reb and I would talk, um, there was something he knew about Jesus that I did not know. And I knew that clearly. He talked about a Jesus that changed his life. I talked about a church that I worked at and served at. And he talked about knowing that Jesus loved him no matter what. I had no clue what that was, nor what it meant. Um, and I was curious. And then this deep sadness of I've been living two lives, a church I have served. And I was a Relief Society president. I was a temple worker. I mean, I know how to be a good Mormon, right? This whole organization I've served, it's not true. It's not in God's word. And he knows a Jesus I don't know. What's up with that? What's up? And then a genius thing on Mr. Brady's part. He's had a lot of genius things, but this was one of them. He said, "What would you come to like a Saturday night service at my church? And you could still go to your church in the morning and hide out in the primary room." Um, so he, and I went, "Hmm, I don't know. I think I'll probably be a lightning bolt's going to come in on your church because I'm not in the right church, right?" I mean, there's a lot there. And so I said, okay. And I remember hearing worship for the very first time. And I remember feeling something I'd never felt because the words in the song were God's words. And then I'd go to Sunday and go, none of that's here. It's all rote. It's all the same thing over and over again. And then Pastor Larry, who eventually led me to the Lord, he was in the book of Ephesians. And I heard my life verse for the very first time. And for it is by grace you've been saved, Carolyn. This is a gift of God. It's not by works, so that no one may boast. And I realized the relationship Rob had with Jesus was because Jesus just wanted my husband's heart. He didn't care about works. He didn't care about what you did during the week. He would help you correct that over a period of time. Once you knew him, he'd help you with all that stuff, right? And I realized that. And it became very clear to me that God just wanted my heart and that God had always been with me in every single one of those years, events that he'd been there. He was sustaining me, and that I got cancer so that I could be saved spiritually. And he did. Shortly thereafter, there was a pastor that said, "Have you ever heard about Celebrate Recovery, Carolyn?" And I went, "Gosh, no." And he said, "I think you'd be a great ministry leader." And I became voracious at helping other people heal. I mean, if there's a poster child for Celebrate Recovery, I'm the girl. I'm 23 years into this thing, and every year we do the steps again, and every year he heals me more. So there you have it.
Amen.
My inventories, which is if you're not a Celebrate Recovery person, an inventory is just where you get the opportunity to write down what happened, the good and the bad. And you get to write it down in a way that is so freeing, and nobody judges what you're putting down on that paper. It's between you, your God, and somebody who's walking with you. And each of those inventories over the last 23 years have helped me forgive my mother at a level where I see the good again. I see my mother's good. I see her brilliant mind. I see the amazing things she did in her community, even in her woundedness. I've been able to forgive Candy's dad. And he's been on several of those inventories because it's a journey. But each of those inventories, we've gotten another level of being able to forgive him. God just took me right through those things. So healing happens.
So, what scripture has meant the most to you? Now, you gave me your life verse, Ephesians 2,
Mm-hmm.
8, and 9. So, are there any other verses that meant a lot to you?
John 8:32, know the truth and the truth will set you free. And God has been very gentle with me in helping me see truth. But I can tell you, whatever you choose to see in God's truth, he can help you heal. There is nothing God cannot help you heal, but you kind of got to see it his way. And he's been very gracious to me all these years to keep peeling back the truth a little more, a little more, a little more. But every time I've seen truth, he's given me the avenue for the healing. There's nothing God can't do. Nothing. And I am living proof. There is always hope. Always hope.
Carolyn, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and maybe you have had some traumatic events in your life, maybe you just have some fears about the future, and these fears have caused you to go down a dark path. Perhaps trying to control your life has led you into calamity. Let me encourage you. Try Jesus. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus Christ can change your life, just like he did for Carolyn. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. So, do you think that you would have ever come to Jesus had you not had cancer?
No. And I say that so emphatically because God knew exactly how stubborn I was. And he knew exactly the degree control had taken in my life. He had to take all my control. He had to hold it for a while for me. Amen. And he needed to hold it. And then he needed that, holding that helped me see what I needed to see and help me understand the differences, right? So absolutely. God saved me to see. God saved me to see.